There is a moment in many homes that no parent is ever truly prepared for. A moment when a child, grown, educated, independent, looks at their parent and says words that cut deeper than silence ever could. You never understood me. You were a bad parent. You ruined my life. And in that moment, the parent does not just feel hurt, they feel erased. But let me ask you something gently. Is that the end of the story or just the beginning of a deeper understanding? There is a moment in life that tests even the most loving parent. A son comes home after years of struggle. He has failed in his career, relationships are broken, and frustration has built layers upon his heart. One evening, in a burst of emotion, he says, "You never guided me properly, you ruined my life." In that instant, the room changes. The air becomes heavy. The parent feels something inside collapse not because of the words alone, but because of everything they sacrificed being questioned in one sentence. Now, in that moment, there are two possible paths. One path is reaction, immediate defense, raising voice, listing sacrifices, bringing up sleepless nights, school fees, responsibilities. The conversation becomes a battlefield where both sides bleed emotionally. The second path is awareness. Awareness says he is speaking from pain, not precision. Let us understand something deeply. Human beings are not always logical when they are emotional. A child who is overwhelmed does not speak like a historian writing facts. He speaks like a storm trying to find wind. There was a real life story of a father in a small town. His daughter, under academic pressure, once told him, "You never cared about me. You only cared about marks." The father felt shattered because for years he had worked extra shifts to afford her education. But instead of reacting, he quietly left the room. Later that night, he wrote her a letter not defending himself, but expressing love. He wrote, "Maybe I failed to show it in the way you needed, but I have always cared." That silence did something powerful. It softened the daughter's heart over time. This is awareness. Awareness is not suppression of emotion, it is mastery over impulse. Because when you react in pain, you create permanent scars from temporary emotions. But when you respond with awareness, you create space for healing later. In relationships, especially between parents and children, not every moment demands a reply. Some moments demand restraint. Think of it like fire. If you pour oil on it, it spreads. But if you step back, it eventually settles. A parent's wisdom is not measured by how strongly they respond, but by how consciously they choose not to escalate what pain has already started. And sometimes silence spoken from awareness becomes the loudest message of maturity a child ever receives. One of the deepest misunderstandings in families is this: we assume every harsh word is a verdict, but often it is a wound speaking, not a person. Young man once told his mother, "You never understood me. You were always controlling." The mother was devastated. She had given her entire life to structure, discipline, and protection. But what she did not realize was that her son was not rejecting her love, he was struggling with how that love was expressed. Children often lack emotional vocabulary. So instead of saying, "I feel pressured," they say, "You ruined my life." Instead of saying, "I felt unheard," they say, "You never cared." This distortion is emotional immaturity, not emotional truth. There is a powerful story of a teacher who once said, "When a student throws anger at you, imagine they are holding a broken mirror. Whatever they reflect is already fractured inside them." In one family, a daughter constantly blamed her father for her failures. "If you had sent me abroad, I would be successful," she said repeatedly. Years later, she went abroad on her own. She struggled deeply: loneliness, financial stress, emotional exhaustion. One night, she called her father in tears and said, "I finally understand." The father did not say, "I told you so." He simply said, "I was not your enemy even when you thought I was." That is emotional maturity. Understanding does not mean agreeing with hurtful words. It means recognizing their origin. A child who feels unheard will accuse. A child who feels lost will blame. A child who feels insecure will rewrite the past. But beneath all of that is a simple human need to be understood. As parents, if we can shift from "Why are you accusing me?" to "What pain is behind your words?" we move from conflict to compassion. And compassion does not mean accepting disrespect. it means seeing beyond it, because when pain is understood, it begins to lose its aggression. And when aggression loses strength, healing begins quietly in its place. There is a subtle emotional trap many parents fall into without realizing it. When children say hurtful things, the immediate inner voice says they must understand what I did for them. I must make them see. But in that attempt, peace becomes dependent on being understood. And that is a dangerous place to live. There is an old farmer's wisdom. The seed does not argue with the soil, it trusts the process. Similarly, parenting is not a courtroom where you constantly defend your intentions. It is a long, silent process of planting values and letting life reveal their meaning. A father once said to his son, "One day you will understand my struggles." The son replied angrily, "I don't want understanding, I want freedom." Years later, when the son became a father himself, he sat quietly one evening and whispered to his own child, "Now I understand what my father meant." No argument from the past was needed. Time did what words could not. Chasing validation often comes from emotional exhaustion. But wisdom says not everything needs immediate recognition. There is a story of a mother who cooked meals for her children every day for 25 years. One day her daughter said, "You never did anything special for us." She did not argue. She simply smiled and said, "That's okay. Someday you will remember." And years later, when that daughter became a mother herself, she cried while preparing her child's first meal. Validation arrived late, but it arrived deeply. Inner peace is not built by being constantly acknowledged, it is built by being anchored in intention. If your intention was love, care, and effort, then even misunderstanding cannot erase its value. Because truth does not depend on immediate recognition, it depends on time. And time has a way of revealing what emotions often hide. Listening is one of the most powerful yet difficult disciplines in human relationships, especially when what you hear feels unfair. Imagine a daughter saying to her father, "You were never there for me." The father remembers working two jobs, missing meals, sacrificing comfort. Every instinct pushes him to respond, to correct, to defend. But wisdom sometimes whispers, "Listen first." There was a story of a grandfather who would sit quietly whenever his grandchildren complained about their parents. He never interrupted, he never corrected, he simply listened. Later, when asked why, he said, "When emotions settle, truth finds its own voice." And he was right. Many times, children who are deeply hurt in their moment of anger later soften naturally. Listening does not mean agreeing, it means allowing emotional release without escalation. When people are heard, their intensity reduces. When they are interrupted, their resistance increases. In one family, a son once shouted at his mother during a stressful phase. Instead of arguing, she quietly sat down and listened. She did not justify herself. She did not fight back. After he finished, there was silence. And in that silence, something shifted. The son eventually said, "I shouldn't have spoken like that." That apology would not have come if the mother had reacted with equal intensity. Listening is not passive, it is powerful restraint, but it requires emotional strength. Because staying quiet while being misunderstood is not easy. Yet sometimes silence becomes the bridge between misunderstanding and reconciliation. And in relationships, bridges are more important than winning arguments. Love without boundaries becomes emotional exhaustion. Boundaries without love become distance. Wisdom lies in balance. When a child speaks disrespectfully, a parent does not need to tolerate emotional harm. But neither should they respond with rejection. A calm boundary might sound like, "I am willing to listen, but not in a way where we hurt each other." This is not punishment, it is protection. There was a story of an elderly mother whose son would often speak harshly during arguments. One day, instead of reacting emotionally, she said gently, "I love you too much to continue this conversation when we are both upset. Let us speak later." And she walked away, not in anger, but in dignity. Later, the son reflected on that moment more than any argument they ever had, because it was the first time he saw strength without aggression. Boundaries teach respect, not through fear, but through clarity. But the door must remain open. Because if boundaries close the relationship entirely, healing has no space to enter. There is a saying, "A locked door protects the house, but an open window allows fresh air." Similarly, emotional boundaries protect dignity, but openness allows reconciliation. A parent's wisdom is knowing when to step back, but also when to gently step forward again. Because relationships are not meant to be abandoned after conflict, they are meant to be repaired after understanding. And sometimes, the most powerful message a parent can send is this: I will not allow disrespect to destroy our bond, but I will also never close the door on love.